None of us wanted you to be here, but the fact of the matter is you go on Piers Morgan's show, you got people like Eddie Hearn running around trying to make fights for you when you've got yourself in a situation. You refuse to acknowledge the existence of UKAD and British Boxing Board of Control. Those have been the issues that you and I have had. Welcome to Talk Boxing with Simon Jordan and Spencer Oliver. For those that count, this is episode 32. As always, at the bequest of our currently present producer, you must like and subscribe. Keep watching the videos. But Spence, let's get on with the show. You all right? Good weekend?
Yeah, very good, Simon. Yep, up there
did you go up
with
to Manchester?
Savannah Marshall. Yeah.
Yeah, did you?
Yeah, it was a great night actually. We'll get into that a bit later on, but it was fantastic, historic moment for women's boxing.
Yeah, we'll talk about the fight in a minute.
Yeah.
There's a subject that's come up on another show that I've just done with Jim White, which is Conor Benn and his circumstances, and the change of temperature and structure of the defence that Conor is now advancing, and the people that he's now got around him. And to be honest, we had a fellow on the show that is quite a significant operator in that space in terms of presenting the pathway of how Conor should A, operate himself mentally, and B, how the conversation should be had about the circumstances that Conor finds himself into. The fella's worked with Ricky Hatton, he's worked with David Hay, he's worked with a lot of chief executives in different businesses, because what his game is to get people's minds fit for purpose.
Yeah.
He knows that the journey that Conor, in part, has chosen to go on has created a toll on Conor, has turned him into a condition mentally. So he's been working with Conor Benn to get Conor into a better place mentally. But alongside that, what he's been doing is looking at the situation to ascertain why Conor's in this position. Not just the fact that Conor has been tested for and failed the clean boxing test and then failed the fight tests, but how this has happened. Because Conor spent the last 12 months in between snarling and shouting and screaming at people and telling the British Boxing Board of Control and UKAD to go and do one, maintaining his innocence.
Yeah.
So this fella's come on to talk about the fact that they've engaged scientists to look at how chloroform can manifest itself in someone's system, and the difference between it coming in from a doping regime and coming in from a legitimate situation where our age-old favourite subject of eggs has been brought to the fore.
How do you differentiate the way that it comes into the system then? Is that what you're trying to say?
No, what they're saying is, in order to have chloroform present in your system, there are two methods that it would get there. Doping, or administering it, or in some way ingesting it through something like eggs. And each method leaves a different residue in the body. So they've tested and proven, they believe, scientifically and factually, over a body of different tests from different scenarios, that the manner in which Conor's body stores estrogen and also retained chloroform is not commensurate with the amount of residue or metabytes that you would have in your system if you had been taking it from a doping methodology. So they've got clinical proof, as far as they're concerned, that the only method that could have got in is an ingestion through something like eggs that have got chloroform in them. And we know that eggs in America have. We know that eggs in the UK do not. So their argument is, we have now got scientific, provable, stand-on-us evidence that the manner in which this residue or metabytes have been kept in Conor's system are only in keeping with an ingestion from a product like eggs.
Is it a case of tracing the eggs, where the eggs came from?
Well, here comes the next question. If indeed, what this does is it provides a conundrum, unless this is already priced in to UKAD's thinking, right? If you've got a substance that can legitimately find its way into your body, and biologically you can prove that it's not as a result of doping, yet you would have no prior knowledge of something like eggs containing it, how fair is that testing regime? Because it requires a different level of testing. Bang, we've established chloroform on the ban list, right? are we able to scientifically evaluate, as these guys are suggesting that you can, how that was brought into their system? These guys are saying, as a matter of clinical fact, we can prove that this is not the result of doping, because the manner in which this drug has been retained in his system, in his sample, is only relatable to it coming in through something like eggs, and is not relatable to it coming in from something like doping. We can scientifically prove that, is what their argument is, and what they're stating, right? And the mouthpiece they've got from him, this guy Rene, is a very smart operator. Conor would have been well served in getting him from the outset. But there's also a school of thought. If they are right, if they are right, it does two things. It debates how chloroform is being used in terms of the UKAD and VADA, suggesting it's a substance that should be banned. And it also brings into consideration the nature of testing, because it says to the person looking in, you test for chloroform, you find it. Then you've got to test the next set of testing as to why it got there, because there is a legitimate explanation if you've got in the food system, in eggs.
So in the food chain, if you've got eggs in your system, basically you're basically saying, well, there could be a possibility of chloroform being in the system as well.
Well, we know that eggs in America have it. So we don't know why Conor would have eggs from America.
This is my point. This is what I need to understand.
But here's the question. Here's the bit that I kept on pushing back with this fellow on. If strict liability is to apply, you've now got a plausible explanation why he moves from the standard straight out of the gate 4-year ban into a conversation where he can explain how it got into his system to some extent, but not necessarily account for every aspect of it. So he moves into a different territory of ban.
Yeah.
But then if you without, I'm not moving my position, because my position has been clear. My position has always been, Conor Benn, prove your innocence, right?
Yeah.
None of us wanted you to be here, but the fact of the matter is, you go on Piers Morgan's show, you got people like Eddie Hearn running around trying to make fights for you when you've got yourself in a situation. You refuse to acknowledge the existence of UKAD and British Boxing Board of Control. Those have been the issues that you and I have had. Get in front of them, prove it.
Yeah.
But here's the irony of it, Spence. If he'd have gone in, the thinking behind his original advice was, it's contamination with VADA. It's VADA's testing equipment is contaminated. Right?
Yeah.
And that was part of a 270-page report. What these guys are saying is, no, sod that. It's nothing to do with VADA's testing equipment. It's to do with the fact that part of Conor's diet contained chloroform. And that is not the same, i.e. eggs that he's eaten, whether he's travelled around Europe or he's been in America or whatever it is. So the argument then says, well, how are you going to find, under strict liability, the next part of it is, Conor has to find the eggs that he bought. I said, well, this is undeniable now. I've given you medical science to prove the fact that this has only come as a result of ingestion of eggs, not from doping. First point. Second point, I found the supply of the eggs right. Then the UK would have to turn around and say, well, on that basis, you've now found your way through this particular conundrum. Off you go. But there's also a school of thought which says, well, if you don't know where you bought these eggs from, but scientific evidence has proven that it's only come in from eggs, and you've got eggs in your diet, and you've been travelling around Europe, should you then have to prove where you got the eggs from? Because if scientific evidence says it is not possible, it is not possible for his results to have produced this outcome if he were taking drugs. If he were taking drugs, the results from the tests that they've produced would come out with a different outcome. Now, the fascinating thing will be how UKAD priced that into the thinking, because what you're now doing there is you're doing two things. You're taking the fairness of strict liability into consideration, and you're taking the reality of a drug that can find its way into someone's system from a legitimate source, and you're potentially penalising Conor Benn for the ignorance of possibly shoving something in his gob that nobody said to him that he shouldn't have taken, which might in this case be something as ridiculous as an egg. And we've all laughed at it, and we've all taken a piss out of it, and we've all turned around and said, how can this be the case?
Yeah.
But these guys are either selling someone a handful of beans, and out of it it's going to come a Jack and the Beanstalk story, or they've got scientific basis. And I've sat on a show listening to an eminent physician doubling down with a very smooth operator that's now handling Conor's representation in the public domain in a far more compelling fashion than any of those Herberts that have been trying to profit out of Conor. Now, whether he can get out from underneath this is still in the arms, it's still up in the air. And what they were talking about is, well, we haven't heard anything from UKAD. Well, you wouldn't hear anything from UKAD because you'll only hear from UKAD when Conor goes in front of them and he can bring you in as his witnesses and of course his expert forensic corroboration. Well, we should hear from UKAD before. No, you shouldn't, because if I'm going into court, I don't get an opportunity to send my forensic guys in to brief the court before I go in and face the beak. I get to bring them in as part of my evidence. So their sort of assertion that we should be able to talk to UKAD is them trying to create a narrative that they already want to plant the seeds in UKAD's minds that you need to look at this before we even get in front of our hearing.
But here's my train of thought. So if it is, let's use this as an example. If it's contamination of eggs, they're saying, well, listen, this is the possibility. It could be contamination of eggs, chloroform in the eggs. It's only ever been traced in America, right? South America, that this situation has happened.
Well, this fellow was talking about finding chloroform in eggs in Italy.
In Italy. Oh, right. Okay, this is a new one. All right. So we have to then trace where Conor was at that time of the testing, where his food was coming from. What I'm saying is, if they want to pull it to bed, if they're that sure,
no.
Surely that's.
But if that's like science, that could be potentially like trying to find a needle in a haystack, right? Because you have to remember where you are. Maybe he can, but there's a question here. If you medically prove that the only way that level of clomiphene in your system can be there is not through doping, why then do you need to go and prove where you got the eggs from? If you have medically proven that the only way that residue, those metabites in the sample that they took...
Are you talking about the amount that was found in the system?
The manner in which his body metabolizes chloroform produces an outcome only in conjunction with ingestion through the food source. It doesn't produce it in conjunction. Everybody, if your body, you as an individual, me as an individual, we dope, it produces a certain type of reaction in our sample.
Understood.
That is a completely different reaction to how it's produced if you ingest it through the food chain. And they've got clinical evidence that they are saying is absolutely compelling, unequivocal, beyond all reasonable doubt. And then the question becomes, if that is indeed the case, and you can accept that the clinical evidence that's being advanced has substance, is there a necessity then, if that's proven to be the case, for him to go find where the bleeding eggs came from?
Yeah, understood.
People are going to listen to this and they're going to think, well, you two guys were having a go. Weren't having a go. We were constantly turning around and saying that it's incumbent upon Conor Benn. And here's the irony of it all, Spence. If he'd have gone in front of the beak this time last year when he was first found guilty of it, or 3 months forward from now, or 2 months forward from now, he wouldn't have had this group of people, this scientific thinking, because what the thinking's changed from is he guilty, these tests, is there any other way that this could have got into his system? Now, people have made that argument, WBC made it for them, right? But they went and looked at the process of what happens when chloroform goes in your system with food.
Yeah.
And they come up with the eggs. And they've come up with the only way that this would be residue in Conor Benn's situation, in this level, would be commensurate with eggs. Because here's how it looks when it goes in with drugs. Here's clinically how it looks with drugs, and here's how it looks with food. And this is what it looked like with food for Conor, and it didn't look like that for drugs. Now, some would say, well, how's his previous testing gone? What's the regime gone before that? But he hasn't had any problems with testing before. And some would say, isn't it ironic that the VADA test that he took, because he didn't want to be part of VADA, and the only reason he decided to be part of VADA's testing regime because he had to be inside the top 15, and bang, straight out of the gate, he's failed a test. This is a fascinating directional change. What it doesn't do is explain the ridiculousness of the advice that he's gotten previously. But fortunately, what it does do for him, if he'd have gone in front of the beak this time last year, like I'm saying, he'd have got a 4-year ban. Yeah. These guys are thinking differently. They've gone, how did it get in there? Is it possible that it got in through another system? What does that result? If you eat an egg with chloroform in it, what happens to your body? Or it produces this kind of outcome. This is what's happened to Conor's body. This is what Conor's body says. So now, 9-10 months later, these guys being in situ, they may just get him out from underneath. I'm not sure they will. But now there's a different discussion to be had. Conor now has a credible argument, a biological and scientific argument, which could unwind and undermine the entire doping regime and how tests are conducted. Because not only do you have to find someone guilty, you then have to have another layer of tests after that to prove that their guilt was ultimately based upon something way beyond their control. Interesting, Spencer.
Yeah,
I know I've
very
spoken.
interesting stuff. Listen, it can change the whole system. We have to wait for the outcome.
Well,
we have to wait for the evidence still to be presented. But fascinating development.
But it's also, you know, the fellas, you know, working with Conor Benn to get his mindset right. Well, we'll see about that. We'll see about that. You know, if Conor comes out from underneath this and manages to clear himself and manages to... the only stigmas that will be left, if he manages to clear himself on scientific evidence, will be the stigmas that he created by his attitude.
Yeah.
And what the fellow was saying was the advice around him is adversarial. Boxers are adversarial by their nature. So by definition, it's a fight or flight, zero-sum game. But I tell you who didn't need to be adversarial, who should have looked after him, was the promoters and the management team he had around him. Less time worrying about how much money they could have made from this kid and more time looking after him. And that's what you and I have said.
Understood.
And that's what I've said explicitly for some time. And people have taken that as a personal assault upon certain promoters. But it's bloody right. And if this kid has been running around, flailing around, I mean, who told him to go on Piers Morgan? Who told him to do that?
As big as it did because of obviously the arguments that were surrounding it and the people that were getting the blame, as opposed to looking at the eye of the storm and the heart of the problem and solving it. That's basically it.
Anyway, we will see. Watch this space. Interesting one. Savannah Marshall did the job. I watched the fight. I don't know, Spence, you were there. Maybe it's better in live than it was on television, but it looked like two women swinging punches in a kitchen.
It was effectively like
not meant to be sexist, by the way.
A bar brawl. I totally understand what you say. Look, listen, Franchon Cruz-Dizon is one of those girls that she's rough, she's tough, she's stubborn, and you know, and she's not particularly attractive to watch. No. But she is effective because she's so strong and so bullish.
Did you see any improvements in Savannah?
Savannah done what she had to do. I think that, you know, speaking to Peter Fury, and you know, they said, listen, tactically they've got to get this right. I think what they wanted to do was use her height, use her reach, try and keep it long.
But she didn't.
Because she soon realised that she had to beat Franchon at her own game. Otherwise, she was going to get too much momentum. She was going to take over, and she would have made it hard for Savannah and difficult, and she would have probably beat Savannah. So what she decided to do quite early on in the fight.
Did you see any technical? I mean, there was no feints. There was nothing.
No,
like
because
I
think it was because Franchon was just pushing on so much, making it so messy. I don't think Savannah had the chance and the opportunity to be able to do that. She wanted to keep it long originally. That was the sort of game plan, and to pick her shots and try and keep the space. But she soon realised that she had to actually beat her at her own game, and she sort of took the fight to her, and she kept it in close quarters. So it wasn't particularly attractive to watch, but I understood what she was doing. She done what she toughed it out. She grinded it out, and she done what she had to do. I thought it was a good victory. I think it was fascinating watching it. As the fight was unfolding, you just didn't know which way it was going to go, how it was going to turn out. Was Savannah going to catch her? Was she going to get caught
I didn't think Savannah was going to lose this fight. And as I was watching the fight, I never thought during the fight that she was going to lose this fight.
I didn't either.
What did you make of the scorecards?
The scorecards were strange, really, because the 95-95.
Yeah.
I saw it 96-95. I had Savannah winning by a round. You know, it was a very close fight. It was going back and forth. Didn't agree with what was the other scores, like 97-92, I think, and 96-93, something, or 97-93, or somewhere.
It was just a messy fight.
Yeah, it was just a messy fight.
So it made it difficult to score.
Subjective scoring. Here's the heart of the problem, I think, here with women's boxing, and this sort of underlined this, was the 2-minute rounds. Because I think another minute in each of those rounds,
would have made a difference,
and we would have seen a different outcome. Yeah. You know, whether that's Franchon Cruz-Dizon, whether she would have taken over in that last minute using her strength, or whether Savannah would have got into some sort of rhythm. And I think that's where the root of the problem is with the scoring system with the women's boxing right now. I saw David Hay actually on the train on the way home. He was talking about that same thing. Right. He said, listen, he thought it was a fascinating fight. He thought Savannah won as well. Yeah. But he said he thinks that the big problem was every time he was getting into it, thinking, right, it's just warming up. Yeah. The round had stopped. Yeah. And that's the problem. So I think that maybe we need to look at that.
Well, there is a
3-minute rounds. There's an argument.
The problem is the optics of women's boxing right now needs to make a decision. It needs to decide whether it's have or a haircut, which is basically part of boxing is seeing people get knocked out. Yeah. And I think there's a certain vantage point, a certain set of optics that doesn't want to see women getting knocked out, and they're going to have to make this decision because if they go to 3-minute rounds, I think you'll see a lot more stoppages.
I totally agree. And listen, I know how difficult that last minute in each round is, and I just think that right now, women's boxing has evolved so much, and they're delivering these girls. You know, we talk about the heavyweight situation later on in the show, and you know what's going on with the heavyweights, which is a complete mess. but the girls are delivering. Go back to October when Savannah boxed Clarissa Shields, you know, that monumental moment at the O2, 20,000 people there. Never thought we'd see that. And every girl on that card delivered, and they were all great fights. Yeah. You can't argue that. And I think that was...
Alicia Brumagard.
That's right. Yeah. You know, Lauren Price was on the undercard as well. We had Tasha Jonas.
Because a lot's been made of the fact that there was only 8,000 fans in there. Now, you've got to remember this event was the undercard of Liam Smith and Chris Eubank Jr. And people were saying, well, look, you know, it wasn't as big an event and there was only 8,000 people there. There was a time, and, you know, I don't know if I go all the way back to Jane Couch, right, but there was a time that 8,000 fans going to a women's boxing match would have been considered a win. Right? And the fact that they are getting 8,000, when we're talking about the potential lack of cut-through in terms of getting the big numbers, we just watched Josh Taylor fight Teofimo Lopez in Madison Square Garden in front of 2,500 people.
Absolutely.
So let's get some bloody context when people are criticising how many people have been at that event.
We saw Lawrence Okoli beat David Light at the O2 Arena. He's our WBO World Cruiserweight Champion, and we see him boxing in front of 4,000 people. Yeah,
get context.
3,999 of those left before the final bell. What I'm saying is these girls delivered. On the undercard, Natasha Jonas, you know, she was incredible as well against Candy Wyatt. So I thought she boxed absolutely brilliantly, become the first British woman 2-weight champion, and she put in an unbelievable performance. You know,
well deserved.
As well. Well deserved. She went out there. Joe Gallagher come up with a perfect game plan against a tough girl who boxed. It was her 4th attempt for the world title. Tasha was coming down in weight, and she executed the perfect game plan. She caught the girl in the first round. Wyatt was hurt badly, done well to get through that. Actually showed incredible courage to get through the 8 rounds that she did. Well, she got stopped in the 8th, but like unbelievable courage. And Tash boxed to a perfect game plan. I thought it was a brilliant performance.
Well deserved. I mean, we were there when she won her first world title. I think it was on the Kell Brook Amir Khan undercard.
That's
right.
Wasn't it? That's right.
And she well deserves it. You think it's? Do you think it's time for her to go? I've done my bit, or do you think she should stay around a little bit longer?
I think she's got to stay around a little bit longer. I mean, she's 39 years of age now. But she's still competing at a good level. You know, she's found her weight. If you go back to when she boxed, she drew with Terry Harper down at super featherweight. You know, a very controversial draw. I thought she won that fight. Very unfortunate. Then she moves up to lightweight and she boxes Katie Taylor. Yeah. And again, it was a very, very close fight. She boxed Katie Taylor in the Olympics, actually. I think they reached a record for the highest decibels when she boxed in the Olympics. It was an incredible fight. You know, so you're thinking, is she going to be one of those girls that you go, she should have been world champion, but never quite got it? Jumps up 3 weight divisions to super welter, wins against Chris Namas in 2 rounds, sensational performance, comes down 1 more weight, wins a 2nd world title, and I spoke to her about it after, actually. I said, you know what, Tash, you seem to have sort of found your weight. You know, there's big fights out there for you against, like, Chantel Cameron, who's the undisputed super lightweight champion. What a fight that would be.
She wants some of that,
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
I'm sure she does, but should she want some of that?
That's where the landscape is for her now, yes. Or do we go back in with Katie Taylor again?
That's a tough fight, isn't it?
Chantel Cameron. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But, like, what I'm loving about the women right now is the best are boxing the best, and they're not afraid to do that. They're not letting politics get in the way, and you know. So I mean, they're delivering, and that's Tash to me. Listen,
what do you make
12
of
more months, a couple of more of them fights, and she's done.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, she deserves it.
Yeah.
As long as she's looking after herself and keeping herself out of harm's way, which she seems to be doing.
Oh, technically, she's she's one of those girls that she's like she's got great boxing IQ. She's uses her space well, doesn't engage too much, doesn't make it as hard.
She's got good power as well.
It's good. It's good.
She's got good power as well.
Oh, she has. Yeah.
What do you make of Clarissa Shields? I thought that was a very inelegant and unedifying set of observations. I thought Savannah handled her quite well, actually.
Yeah, she did.
You know, what am I going to go, because she's giving it the big one about not going to come and fight in the UK. Well, you just got on a plane and paid for your own ticket and flew away over to the UK to tell her that you're not going to fight in the UK.
Well, she come on the radio with us after, actually.
We're not going to build that narrative that I'm scared of Savannah Marshall because she's at super middleweight now. That's not a narrative. Nobody's scared of Savannah Marshall. My only request is I've already come over here to the UK to beat you. If you want to fight again, we're not going to fight in the UK. She doesn't deserve that. I beat her unanimously. Come to America, come to Detroit, come to T-Mobile, come to MGM Grand, come to the US. Fight me in Africa, but we're not going to fight in the UK. Absolutely not.
What's the reason for that? Would you not say that there's more financial benefits for you to fight here? Or
it's financial benefits everywhere, but she's disrespectful. She lied on my name. She said that I don't sell tickets in the U.S. and I just fought and did 12,000 tickets.
Yeah.
And I don't like that disrespect. After I was open to even give her a chance to come over and to be booed on the national anthem, booed walking out, for her to continue to spit on my name. So that's where it comes from, to where she absolutely will not get a rematch here in the UK. And it's not that I don't love the fans here. It's just that it's her. It's her attitude. It's her demeanor. It's her not being humble enough to respect me as the champion that I am and to stop telling lies. Maybe if she apologized for lying, maybe I'll fight her in the UK. But she gets on Sky Sports and just say that I don't sell tickets and I'm hard to work with, and that's absolutely not true.
Well, let me tell you, this is where women's boxing is happening. And this is where you're going to get paid. And what do I make of her screaming and shouting afterwards? You know what? It's nothing that I didn't expect from her. I got it before. She actually gave me a before because I picked Savannah to beat her in the first fight, and she sort of, you know, we know how loud and brash she is.
There does need to be marked improvements in Savannah to be able to avenge. I mean, maybe going up to a bigger weight will help Savannah more than it will help Clarissa.
Great point.
But notwithstanding that, we're talking about the technical difference between Clarissa Shields and Savannah Marshall is not insignificant.
Clarissa Shields is called the GOAT for a reason. Like, she is, you know, she is the best woman boxer on the planet. Will she get beat? I'm not even sure she'll get beat. I think the only thing that will beat her is by judging the wrong weight category. You know, whether she moves up to super middleweight, she's not particularly big. Where Savannah Marshall is a big girl. She's a big, tall girl. She's got a big frame. You know, she's the naturally bigger of the two. So if the fight happens at super middleweight, you give Savannah Marshall more of a chance. If she's bringing Savannah down to middleweight or anywhere around that, even if Savannah could make anything under that, which I don't think she does, but she brings her down to middleweight, you've got to go Clarissa, because I think that's where she's proven.
I can't make a case for Savannah even at
at super middle?
No.
Interesting.
I think that Clarissa has got too much about her, too much technical ability, and whilst there'll be more natural power from Savannah, I'm not sure she can execute on Clarissa.
But two undisputed champions going in it together, like Chantel Cameron and Katie Taylor. You know, it's all about making history and the best boxing the best. I'd like to see it again. I would.
Ben Whittaker. I don't know. I mean, obviously, we're talking about a remarkable talent. We're talking about someone that's going to be developed and handled and pushed through. But, you know, Gareth made a point, and I think he was right to make the point. You're in the light heavyweight division. He doesn't seem to have particularly heavy hands, Gareth A. Davis. And, you know, the class and quality of his work shone through, right?
Yeah.
But we're talking about fighting against journeymen that have lost 7 of the last 10, 15 fights that the fella's been in. This is just him getting some ring craft or some ring awareness, isn't it, in terms in the pro ranks? This is where
I see Ben Whittaker. I think that he's an exceptional talent. One of the best talents globally right now. But I think he's about too much in there. It's too much showmanship, you know, too much clowning around, too much dancing, too much playing up to the crowd. Focus on what you're doing a little bit more. And I think that's why he's lacking the punching power that should be there, because I think of the clowning around. I think if he settles down a little bit more, you know, he's elusive. He's this sort of Nazim Hamid like in his movements and whatnot. But Naz used to give those movements, but he would sit down on his feet. He would, you know what I mean? He would be very strong in his attacks. Do you know what I mean? He would commit in his attacks, whereas Ben Whittaker at the moment is pot shotting. He's picking the shots, and focusing more on clowning around, showmanship. When we saw him, when he actually was getting into the later rounds, when he got into round 6, round 7, he recognised, hold a minute, I'm not going to get rid of this kid unless I start sitting down on my shots, start putting them together in clusters. And that's exactly what he done. He sat down there, he started switching the attacks to the body.
I saw a lot
punches
of that,
4 and 5.
Quality work though, wasn't it?
It was quality work. Forget the first 3 or 4 rounds, because for me, he was just around too much, showboating too much, and I think it's a lesson. That's part of his development stage. I mean, there's some massive fights out there for him. You know,
I'd like to see him go. I mean, I was thinking about it over the weekend, thinking about who should he go in with next, because obviously, you know, people saying, "Oh, geez, you put him in with Yard and Boatsi or Craig Richards." That'd be silly. You're not going to put him in that stage, are you? You know, I'd like to see him go in with the guy that fought Boatsi recently, Stepien.
Stepien, yeah. Well,
I think that's a good fight for him to go in with.
Listen, we're talking about a kid who's only had 4 fights, you know.
But we're also talking about levels now.
Yeah, absolutely.
We know how much benefit is he getting by going in with people that can absorb punishment?
Well, what I think what he learned from that last fight was, what he actually learned from that fight was that you won't get away with around as much as you are, because that was a slight step up, nowhere near where he needs to be, but he then recognised that, well, listen, because I saw a change in the tempo of what he was doing. We saw him playing around, then you see him sitting down his shots a little bit more, thinking, I've got to stop clowning around as much here, because this kid's going to take me the distance. And then it goes down as not a great performance, you know, because you look at people that have, you know, stopped him inside the distance before, and you go, yeah, absolutely, yeah, look at that, and you go, listen, look, I need to make a statement here, because that's what it's all about, him making a statement. You know, there's some big fights out there for him. Stepian is a great opponent that I'd like to see him next with. And, you know, he's going to be the sort of kid that you're going to see boxing for British titles, like in his 10th, 11th fight, and sort of going through it like that. But, yeah, he's definitely got the talent there. And I think that,
no doubt.
I don't look at the punch power thing going from that one, because I think he hits hard enough. I think he's got speed of hand. And I think that will make the difference. He's just about developing right now.
Because this is the division that you need to be heavy-handed in. I mean, let's have it right.
Absolutely.
I mean, this was a division that you had people like Adonis Stevenson in.
Absolutely.
Right? And these guys knock people out for fun.
And you can only get away with certain amount of about when you come up against people like that. You can only get away with it so much.
Yeah, because you make one mistake, they're going to put you on your ass.
Absolutely, you know.
But what you have to do, Ben, is when you're invited on shows like this, turn up, because you won't be invited again, mate. I mean it. You can do one. Sorry, mate. That might be why I'm being a bit salty about him. All right, moving on to Tyson Fury, the never-ending saga that surrounds Tyson Fury, and this argument and this debate about him damaging his legacy, and seeing certain fights look like they're Francis Ngannou, and situations like. What do you? I mean, we've touched upon it before. We had Frank Warren on the other day. And I sort of pushed the argument that Tyson is difficult to deal with, and that's the reasons why fights aren't necessarily happening. We all know the overarching problem is that Saudi money, and when those fights get made is when Saudi decide they'll get made, and in between then and then everyone else can go to hell in a handcart. But what do you make of what's orbiting around and circling around Tyson at this moment in time?
Do you know what? It's frustrating, not just for us, but for the boxing fans, you know, for the casuals out there that want to see the fights, want to see the best fight the best. You know, the Saudis were offering that opportunity with Fury versus Usyk, Joshua versus Wilder, and Fury's decided to take his own path, you know, take his and control his own destiny. I mean, Francis Ngannou, do I want to see that fight? Not really. Has he ever been in the boxing ring? No. Forget what he's done as a UFC champion. I'm not interested in that. It's two different combats, and it doesn't bother me. You know, you're going to go, oh, right, let's see that as a exhibition fight. Let's do it at Wembley Stadium. I've got no interest in that. Why have I got no interest in that? Because I've been looking forward to the undisputed champion, finding out who's the best of the modern era. And I thought we're so close to going, right, we're going to get the best versus the best. We're going to have a semi-final and a final, and we're going to find out who it is. All of a sudden now, this has popped up. I go, I'm not interested in that.
No, I don't think anyone should be, to be quite frank, because I don't think it's... when Frank Warren was talking about the idea there's a game changer in the offing, and it can't be this. No. I mean, I know what it is, and I'm not telling you, but it can't be this. Right?
Come on,
no.
What do you mean?
It's Frank's gift. Frank's gift.
Give us a little clue.
No, it's Frank's gift. It's an interesting one. It will change the metrics of when fights get made, and it won't mean that you're dependent upon certain people and certain factions.
Nice.
So I don't think the game changer is Tyson Fury fighting Francis Ngannou.
Well, that is a breath of fresh air.
And I don't think that it should be a fight anyway. And I don't think Tyson Fury should be involved in it, because irrespective of the fawning, cloying, sycophantic drivel that we got from Mauricio Suleiman the other day about what a special kind of champion he is, these guys should be made to fight more regularly than they currently are.
I agree.
And Tyson fighting, I had this row with Frank about if you're accusing Tyson of being inactive, but why didn't Joshua take the 60-40 split in November? I said, because he bleeding well shouldn't have done. Because that wasn't a fight that he was ready for. And you know, your boy had fought 7 months earlier on a 4-round beatdown on Dillian White. And whereas Anthony Joshua had fought 2 fights back-to-back against what you're now saying is one of the elite fighters, and you wanted to get him in a ring 3 months after that, and that was just stupid.
That's when he's at his most vulnerable. You know, Joshua going August the 12th, I'm hearing actually Dillian White has received the contracts.
Signed it, from what I understand.
Signed the contract, so we get that fight August the 12th, sets Joshua up. I know that Anthony Joshua, Deontay Wilder, Eddie Hearn reports that Anthony Joshua, Deontay Wilder does go on in December. Alexander Usyk on the undercard, so I reckon Usyk, by the way.
Well, it's interesting because I hear that's not the case. I also hear that ultimately the Fury Usyk fight doesn't happen until the first quarter of next year.
I think that Usyk actually boxes Filip Hrgovic next, who's his IBF mandatory challenger.
Yeah.
And I think that, that's where he goes.
According to Frank Warren, that's not going to be happening because Daniel Bart's going to deal
with
this
is it. This is it.
And we're bitching and moaning, but let's be clear.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting thing about the Dillian Whyte Anthony Joshua argument, because I had this argument with a couple of people inside Anthony Joshua's camp, you are, who made the argument about, I said, he can't have a rematch clause in there. He can't have a rematch clause in there. He can't take all the money out of the equation, leave Dillian Whyte with very little dignity in that respect. You're just here to make up the numbers sort of thing, and then get a rematch. And their argument was a solid one, which is, well, Dillian Whyte doesn't have to fight, does he?
Yeah.
If Dillian Whyte can get paid £3-4 million for fighting someone else, then let him go fight someone else. He can't get paid £3 or £4 million for fighting someone else, so he gets to fight us. Point. So then I said, well, but the rematch clause is a bit of a Mickey take. You're having it all ends but up, right? And they said, we've got it on every single fight. Every single fight that Anthony Joshua has had for a significant period of time had a rematch clause. So I went back and had a little dig around and found out in the first Dillian Whyte Anthony Joshua fight, there's no rematch clause.
Is that
so
right?
I went back to Joshua's camp and said, hang on a second, you lot. You told me that the rematch clause was in every single contract, at every fight, because there's so much investment in Anthony Joshua. And the first fight with Dillian Whyte, he didn't have it. So what are you on about? So it's funny how that rematch clause has now come out.
Yeah.
I think that I think Dillian Whyte wants to rip him a new one. Whether he's capable of doing it is a different matter.
Well, yeah, be interesting, won't it? I'm more interested in where you get your information. When you have these little dig-abouts, I'm interested. Perhaps you need to pass me a couple of numbers.
Of this sort of monkey on my back that is you, I can think clearly.
Yeah, because you do.
Not carrying you around on my shoulder like some demented old man of the sea.
Research whenever you're doing something with me, because of my knowledge.
Go on in. Joe Joyce came in the other day. I think I upset him a little bit. As much as it's not easy to upset Joe because he's the most placid, nicest, kindest fella you'd ever want to meet. But we talked about the Zhang fight, and obviously it was announced here, and came in with Frank, and I just said to Joe, I don't like this fight for you. I don't, I know that you think that it's the way. It's not a thought. It's a reality that you're going to get back to being WBO mandatory, and that's going to give you an opportunity to have a fight relatively quickly. Because if Dubois were to beat Usyk, then
it rips it all up anyway.
It rips it all up and changes the direction of travel. But I just worry because you look so slow against Zhang, and you look light, and it didn't make any sense to me. And your propensity to be relaxed about shipping punishment, you made the whole fight build up about how strong your chin was, and I felt that narrative was a strange narrative. Because eventually, if you keep on offering your chin, someone big enough is going to hit it and put you where you don't want to be. And Joe was like, oh, thanks, mate. I've got to go in the ring with him. I know all that. Right?
I watched the interview.
He didn't like it. And I didn't mean to be. I wasn't trying to be unpleasant. I'm trying to say I think that Zhang should have been left to sail off into the sunset, fight somewhere else. I always made the point to Frank.
I was with you on that as well.
Pay Joe step aside. Let Fury fight Zhang. Right. And then if Joe wants to come back round again and fight, but then their argument is that we lose the WBO mandatory position by doing that.
Sure.
Is it? I suppose the bigger question I'm asking is it do or die for Joe on this?
It sort of is where he's at in his career. As in, I know people are going to go, well, he's only had the one loss or whatever, but we're talking about elite level. And look, as we've seen with this heavyweight landscape right now, how difficult it is to get these fights on. Time's not really on Joe's side. He is 36 years of age. He's been around...
37, I think.
37. He's 37 years of age. And it's a must-win fight for him, really. It's not like a career ender if he doesn't win it. But at elite level, it's a long way back.
It's going to define him, isn't it?
Absolutely.
By definition, because people are going to go, you couldn't beat this 41-year-old. He's a big fella. Hrgovic beat him, which was nip and tuck, by the way. But you're not at that level. And that makes Joe Joyce's opportunities. It still opens. It still doesn't mean the door can't be opened further down the line. If you get a unification fight and then the belts get scattered after that, it doesn't mean that there's not an opportunity for Joe. But he stops becoming a compelling proposition.
Yeah, absolutely, because it's a must-win fight for all those reasons. To put his name right up there. Look, after he had that victory against Joe Parker, everyone was talking about, he's the heavyweight. He's the one that could give Fury problems. He beats Anthony Joshua. It doesn't. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All of that.
He talked about changing his style. He talked about how quick he thought. He didn't think Zhang was going to be as quick as that. I think he looked quick, Zhang, because Joe looked remarkably slow.
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone would suggest in comparative terms to the other elite heavyweights that Zhang is quick.
Yeah.
It's just that Joe is sort of slow motion replay slow.
Zhang has got very slow feet. He's got very quick hands. So how do you beat someone like that? Is that you speed up the footwork and you try and throw your shots. You stay out of range a little bit and keep the distance a little bit. That's what Joe has to do. Whether he can implement that is another thing. But I think that he come in too light. I know he was talking about the nutritional guy on your show, actually.
He said it was no diet change. He said, He said, I felt the same, I ate the same.
Well, I'm going to say Joe come in a stone heavier because when you beat Joe Parker, a stone heavier than that, he looks a better fighter.
Because they were making an argument. They were making an argument that, of course, the damage that was done to his eye is just a result of getting hit by a heavyweight, right?
Yeah.
And that happens, right? But they felt that they were going to catch up with this guy further down the fight.
Later, yeah.
I don't know. The longer this fight was going on,
well, I think,
the more. Yeah, I mean, okay,
I'll tell you what it was, because this is where it is. Joe Joyce is normally the guy that controls the pace, right? He goes at a pace that other heavyweights don't go, and that's where he comes into his own. Where he's technically he might not be the best, and he might be a lot slower than a lot of other heavyweights, but he's got a high work rate, and he grafts for 12 rounds, and he slowly, systematically breaks fighters down. That's what the plan was with Zhang. Because as with Zhang, when he boxed Hrgovic on the undercard of Anthony Joshua versus Alexander Usyk, we saw him rapidly get tired after 6 rounds. He slowed right down. It looked like he had Hrgovic done and beat. Hrgovic actually looked like he was going to come out of it a couple of times.
But he did too much damage to Joe. And
well, this is the point. Yeah, this is the point. So Joe it's got to be educated pressure. Like Joe did when he boxed Daniel Tabari. He had a game plan.
Yeah.
He was moving away from the right hand. He worked it out well, and he slowly, broke him down, got the jab, got into a rhythm with a jab. I think he has to come in at 19 odd stone against Zhang, and he's got to be a little bit more educated in what he's doing. It was so one-dimensional in that fight.
Go back to how he fought Dubois.
Absolutely. If
and
it's
remember
not broke,
that,
don't fix it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the way that he beats him and just tries to take him into the second half of the fight. If he can do that, he can grind out the victory.
Okay, well, let's hope so. Right, that's it for episode 32 of Talk Boxing. Don't forget, as I said at the top of the show, to keep liking and subscribing. Keep watching the videos. And myself and Spence will see you next time out.